just gonna get the elephant out of the way. I know you're like, I get the Steve part, I get the Lee part, you gotta explain the Bang part. What is the middle name, Bang? That word Bang, it's actually an English transliteration of a Korean word which means ark. My parents, their prayer for me was that, like Noah's Ark, I would be a vessel of salvation. That's called pressure. That's called Asian pressure. But I've been married for about 10 years now. So my wife and I, we got married when we were 6 years old. And we have 3 kids and a 4th on the way. Normally when I tell people that, they're like, wow, you must really love kids. No, I just really like my wife. And the kids, I don't know what happens, but they just keep showing up. Laughter is a gift. I'm trying to just get us to laugh a little bit in the morning. Speaking of my wife, she is a doctor. She's an anesthesiologist, which means that she puts people to sleep for surgery. I share that because as a preacher, I tend to have a similar effect when it's spiritual surgery, but all right, that did not go as well as planned, but it is such an honor to be with you guys. I'm actually a graduate of Talbot Seminary, and so I love Biola. And hey, could we just take a moment? Could we just appreciate the chapel staff, just Mike, Noreen, Sydney, the band, tech booth. Thank you guys so much for an incredible work. You guys are truly, truly blessed. Have you guys heard about that one church with all the kind of controversy that's happening in this one church? Have you guys, no one's on Twitter? In a moment, I'm actually gonna tell you the name of this church. You're like, ooh, that's a little gossipy, so just hang on. But what's happening in this church is there is so much division that there are people in the church who are actually claiming allegiance to certain speakers. There are certain people who are saying, I follow this one speaker, and another group of people in the church are saying, no, you don't understand, I follow that other speaker, and so there's this division that's happening in this church right now, and they have some immorality issues, some sexual immorality issues, even to the degree that someone is actually having sexual relations with a family member. Yeah, I'm surprised you guys haven't heard about this. And no one's doing anything about that in the church. There's litigation issues happening with this church. People, believers, Christians, are actually taking each other to court, which is really saddening. And then just because this never happens anywhere, but people in the church are actually using their talents kind of for themselves. They're using their church as a platform. And the name of this church is, before I tell you the name of that church, I have a question. Would you join that church? Would you be a part of that? Would you even go to one service? Would you invite your friends? Would you invite a family member? How about this one? Would you invite someone who doesn't know Jesus and they're like, I'm ready, like, take me to church. Jesus, take the wheel. Like, would you invite them to that church? Probably not. Because the way that you would describe that church, if I were to ask you to give me some words, it might be things like, it's broken, it's rebellious, it's dysfunctional. Someone here might be like, no, it's unbiblical. So we would use all types of words to describe this particular church. But what if I told you that the name of this church that I just described, the name of the church was the Church of Corinth. And the founding pastor was this guy by the name of Paul, the Apostle Paul. You know, often you might hear someone say something like, man, I just want to be part of a New Testament church. I just want to be part of a New Testament church. Well, Corinth was a New Testament church. And what's fascinating is that as I was describing this church just moments ago, you probably had certain feelings towards this church, like, oh, how could they? Horrible. But what if I asked you, how do you think the founding pastor, Paul, felt towards this church? I mean, do you think like he would have gone after them, right? Well, surprisingly, we just read it in the opening scripture reading, but that was the letter of 1 Corinthians, the introduction of Paul to this church, where he's saying, grace and peace from God to you. In fact, every time I think about you, I'm always giving thanks to God because of you, which that is not the way that I would have responded to Corinth, right? Like if Paul were here, I'd be a little bit disappointed. I'd be like, dude, lean in, bro. Like lean in a little bit. Like do the little like apostle thing. You're letting them get away with all sorts of crazy, this is why the church is losing young people and millennials, right? Like that would be what I would tell Paul. And yet what we see from Paul is a surging confidence. He is raving and glowing, and he loves, and he's celebrating this dysfunctional, messy, imperfect church that was Corinth. How? Why? Oh, I know how. It's because Paul, he didn't know what was actually happening in the church, right? Or maybe he just swept everything under the rug. He just kind of pretended like it wasn't there. No, that's not true, because he would spend the next 15 or so chapters dealing with and addressing these issues. So how did Paul, knowing all these messy realities about Corinth, speak about them in such glowing terms? And here's the secret, I think. It's not that Paul ignored the church's realities. He just pushed into its fullest realities. Namely, not just the messiness of the church, but the gospel realities of the church in God's eyes. We know this because of the past gospel tense that Paul uses and the future gospel tense that Paul uses. In verse 2, he said, to the church of God that is in Corinth, to those sanctified in Christ Jesus. So meaning in the past, there was a moment when you placed your faith in Jesus, something radically happened in the invisible where you were almost set apart and cut out from the world to now belonging to him. This actually happened in the past. You were sanctified. You were dedicated to him in relationship. But then he also refers to their future in verse 8 when he says, and there's going to come a day when you stand guiltless before God, face to face with him in the day of Jesus Christ, our Lord. So in the past, sanctified. In the future, awaiting glorification, which means in the present, when he was writing this, he knew that they were undergoing something called sanctification, which is spiritual transformation, that they were in process for spiritual progress, which meant that Paul, he saw and he affirmed the gore of the church. But he also affirmed the glorious gospel that had transformed, was transforming, and would transform them for eternity. He did not ignore the realities. He just pushed into the fullest realities so that he could not only see of them what he could see with his eyes or what he heard from his ears, but he saw things through God-centered lenses. And that's why in verse 2, Paul could say of Corinth, you are the church of God, the church belonging to God, possessed by God, owned and belonging to him. And if this is true, if Paul can feel this way about this messy and dysfunctional church, that has all sorts of crazy implications for us this morning. Okay, now I got to be quick because I only have 90 more minutes. All sorts of crazy implications, like namely, how do you see the church this morning? How do you see God's church? Now, I'm not just talking about the amazing, wonderful spiritual community that you have here at Biola. You guys, this is a gift. What you have is a gift. But I'm not just talking about here at Biola. I'm talking about the local assembly, the local church, either down the street or in another city. You know that clunky, slow-moving, awkward, intergenerational, old people, weird-looking teenagers, little kids with snot coming down their nose. That's my 3 kids every single Sunday. The kind of weird, do I show up to this event? There's no one here. Decent worship, music, the sometimes, often boring sermon local church. What is your view of that church? Do you see it the way Christ sees it? Or do you just see it the way you and I, or maybe your Twitter feed sees it? See, I love this theme that you guys are going through with because I think this idea of witness, can I get a witness? It's this massive theological theme in the Bible. I mean, from beginning to end, it's everywhere. And I love that you guys are exploring this and unpacking this. But if you are with Christ and Christ is with you, are you also with Christ's bride? Are you with his wife? Because, I like to tell people that I went through 2 conversions. The first conversion was understanding the gospel. It radically changed my life and spiritual disciplines, my vertical relationship with Christ. I pursued that like no other. Reading the Bible, done. Memorizing entire books of the Bible word for word, done. Fasting a year and a half of meat just because for a cause, done. But in that process, something started happening in my heart where I almost saw God's church as this, why is this even necessary? In fact, these people slow me down. Like, I'm a way faster Christian without these people. And that pastor, oh my gosh, his hermeneutics, crying out loud. But the second conversion that I like to tell people that I had was that I realized that I could not say yes to Jesus, but then simultaneously say no to his wife. That I could not say yes to God the Father, but say no to his children. That I could not affirm theologically that Jesus is the head of the church and then decapitate him from the church that is his body. How do you see the church? Are you with his bride? When we see Paul's hope for Corinth, I think there are 2 invitations that we're invited to this morning. I'm gonna go quick, I only have 50 more minutes, all right? Here's invitation number 1. Some of you guys are like, this guy, the jokes need to go away. It's not working, it's too early. Here's invitation number 1. Invitation number 1 is you and I, we are invited to embrace colliding realities of God's church. We're invited to embrace the colliding realities of God's church. If you're here and you are disappointed by your church or a church, if you're disillusioned, or maybe you're sitting here and you're saying, hey man, like my old pastor, he used people like cogs in his organization. Or, yeah, my church, they sing hymns, but they don't care about the homeless. Or maybe you're here and you're like, have you checked #church2? I know. I totally get it. I totally get it. And I'm with you in that. I see it too. The church, it is messy. So many of our churches, they're broken. There's disunity. There's immorality. There's no concern for what's happening outside. And sometimes you pick up this book and you're like, I don't understand how they live like that in the book of Acts. And then I look at my church and it looks nothing like that. And so if you're here and you're disappointed, I just want you to know, I get it. The church is messy. It is imperfect. And yet at the same time, she is the hope of the world. The pillar and foundation of God's truth. And here's why we can lean into this. Because our gospel, the gospel of Jesus Christ, it really is that powerful. You see, if the gospel is powerful enough to save someone like me, biggest sinner in the room right here, and yet if I can say to you, I've been sanctified, I've been justified and declared righteous because of his work, and right now, guys, I'm being spiritually transformed. And one day, I'm gonna be sinless. I'm gonna be sitting on a throne with Jesus. If there is such hope, if the gospel is powerful enough to have that kind of saving work in my life and yours, other sinners in the room, then certainly and possibly it can also have hope for a church like Corinth and our churches. And so we're invited to hold both tensions, you guys. It's both. You see, anyone can be a cynic. Can we agree with that? Anyone can be a cynic, but not everyone can be mature. Hey, that was pretty good. You can tweet that. Because maturity is the ability to take different things that seem like they're in collision against one another, and yet holding it together, allowing the most eternal truths to shape temporal realities, and not letting eternal realities be shaped and taken off course by temporal, situational, circumstantial ones. And so you and I, we're invited. Anyone can be cynical, but not everyone can be mature. And you're invited to a gospel-centered maturity to say, I get it. I see God's church for what it is, but I also I know how he sees it for what it is. And they're both true. So you're invited to embrace colliding realities. But here's the second invitation. Not only are you invited to embrace those realities, you're also invited to enter into the messy reality that is the church. To actually enter into a local body and to do life with those people. See, what I love is Paul, if anyone could have said, oh my gosh, you guys are broken, I'm out, it should have been Paul. And yet what we see is he goes, I'm in. I'm gonna write a 15-page letter to you to get in there. Have you read 2 Corinthians? He's like weepy. Every time I read 2 Corinthians, tears are coming out of the Bible, right? It's just the most, just putting my heart out there. I love you guys. Open your heart up for me. He gets in there. So we're invited to get embodied, to show up, to be present, to get into relationship. Like if I can just be honest, at my church, there are certain Sundays where the message, I'm like, that wasn't really for me. It really wasn't a sermon for me. But here's what I discovered when I get in there. I get to see the gospel at work in other people's lives. I get a front row seat in how the gospel brings about sanctification. Currently, I'm in a church small group. Dude, there are some weird people. And I know this is being recorded. I just signed the release form, so I'm in trouble. But there's some weird people. Like there are people, my wife and I didn't mean to drag my wife into this. I go, man, if we weren't at the same church, if we weren't at the same small group, we would never be friends. And my wife is like, you're a jerk. But right, just like there are awkward people, there are people who are like, they have a ton of baggage and they're working out their baggage in front of us and it just feels so tense and weird sometimes. And yet the beauty is in the midst of all that discomfort and just weirdness, we see the grace of God on display in his church. But it takes us getting in there in embodied relationships. And if I could just invite you guys to this, if anyone's here and you're in the process of looking for a local church, man, I just want you to know, please don't look for a perfect church because you're not going to find one. And if you find one, please don't join it. You will ruin it. But I love what half of you are really angry with me right now. I love what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said. He said, those who love their dream of community more than community will destroy community. So abandon your dream and embrace God's dream down the street. You're invited to enter into the messy reality. Will you be with God's church? I'm going to conclude with a story and a quote. There's this great story that is referenced by a pastor, John Ortberg, in his book, The Life You've Always Wanted. And in this book, he actually describes a story that was told by another writer. So it's a writer stealing another writer's story. I don't know why I had to say that. I'm sorry for that snark moment. But in this, and it's a great story because this story is what could be known as it's like the wedding of the decade. It's this incredible wedding, and 24 brass and wind instruments, 24 bridesmaids. I'm like, I don't even have 24 friends. I don't even have 4 friends, right? 24 bridesmaids, gift registries to the best department stores in the country. I mean, just the whole 9 yards. Just the biggest, greatest, grandest wedding that you can imagine. Well, the story goes that everything of this wedding was going perfectly according to plan right up to the processional, which is really the most important part of the wedding. Because the bride, she was in the hallway, the reception hall, getting ready to walk down the aisle with her father. But she had been in this dress, not that I would know, but for hours, tired, exhausted. And so while being out in the reception hall, there's like fruit and snacks, and so she just kind of mindlessly just started eating. Oh, look, there's some, yellow and green mints, and so she started eating some yellow and green mints. And oh, hey, there's glazed almonds. I'll have some glazed almonds. Oh, bacon-wrapped shrimp. I mean, I'll eat anything bacon-wrapped. And so, she just ate some sausages. Okay, and her dad gave her a little, champagne to wash it down. You know what's happening, right? You know what's going to come. The double doors swing open. People did not really notice her white dress because they noticed her face, which was deathly pale. And as she walked down the aisle, and as she was kind of near the front, just as she was passing her mother, she threw up. Oh, no. It's not one of those no, the glory of Jesus, just boom. Just spray-a-thon. It landed on 2 bridesmaids. It landed on the groom. By the way, the whole thing was being recorded by 3 different cameras. But here's why I love this story. Because the person who recounts it says this. At the wedding, everybody cried, as people are supposed to do at weddings. Mostly because the groom, he held the bride in his arms through the whole ceremony. And no groom ever kissed the bride more tenderly than he. And the story goes on that 10 years later, they all got together and had a party watching the videos. You know why? And they celebrated. You know why? Because in the end, the bride still got the groom. The bride still got the groom. John Stott, theologian, said, on earth, she, the church, is often in rags and tatters, stained and ugly, despised and persecuted. But one day, she will be seen for what she is, nothing less than the bride of Christ, free from spots, wrinkles, and any disfigurements, holy and without blemish, beautiful and glorious. It is to this constructive end that Christ has been working and is continuing to work. The bride does not make herself presentable. It is the bridegroom who labors to beautify her in order to present her to himself. And in the end, the bride will get even Corinth, even our churches, and we will get Jesus.
Discover who you're called to be at Biola University, a leading Christ-centered university in Los Angeles, with programs on campus and online. Subscribe for more of our videos and learn more at biola.edu.